we know. We go back to the Greeks. And it seems as if it's the Greeks that's given us all these interpretations of these civilizations that we're discovering. So it's the same thing with the ancient Egyptians, where we get all these so-called Egyptian, words, but they really come from the Greeks, Egyptian itself. And then we dig deeper into the civilization and we found out, okay, this is what this really is. And the Greeks just put a spin on it. And it's the same across the board when you really pay attention. So if you've seen Saturn, Satan, 7, and it's a reason why, again, I put stuff in certain orders. But, we talked about Saturn, Jupiter, and why that's important, and for you to understand that story and what took place and how it fits with the book of Genesis. But it also, and I know some of you guys are going to know this already, it fits with the Sumerian story. But, so I don't have to get into all that over again. I want to give you guys the clip real quick so you can really pay attention to this information and see what I'm talking about. Take a look. Jupiter becomes a demiurge, or the demiurge, however you want to pronounce it. Jupiter is the demiurge. What is the demiurge? And it says here, a being responsible for the creation of the universe. In Platonic philosophy, the maker or creator of the world. That's important. In Gnosticism and other theological systems, a heavenly being subordinate to the supreme being that is considered to be the controller of the material world and antagonistic to all that is purely spiritual. So we just read that Jupiter is the demiurge, right? And how do you become a demiurge? To be a demiurge, you have to be a creator god. You have to have created the world. So Jupiter created this planet. And it says here in Scientific American, a new study, however, suggests that without Jupiter, Earth itself might not exist either. Where this and the other rocky planets now orbit, there may have first been a previous generation of worlds destined to be bigger, gas-shrouded, utterly uninhabitable orbs. But Jupiter came swinging in, clearing the way for small worlds like Earth by destroying those older planets. The study, co-authored by California Institute of Technology, Planetary scientists, whatever. Now it says here, it is understood, and this is from David Topper, it is understood that Velikovsky believed the Earth and Saturn to have once moved in close proximity, with the Earth perhaps revolving as a Saturnian moon. The Saturn myth proposes that Saturn, fixed at the celestial pole, loomed massively overhead a central sun venerated by all mankind. Evidence is presented there for a Saturnian polar configuration as the source of early civilization's dominant symbols. Velikovsky believed and argued that Jupiter and Saturn were most likely part of the binary system of stars because of the outstanding position of Saturn in the ancient world. As Velikovsky claimed, Saturn was probably closer to Earth and more of Jupiter at the time. So now understand, saying here, did the Great Flood actually occur? An already open question for today's disputes. According to Velikovsky's research, he did not just happen. This did not just happen. But also, through the fall of Saturn and his giant space neighbor Jupiter, in the above-mentioned book, Worlds in Collision, Velikovsky argued that Saturn and Jupiter came very close to each other, being on orbital paths that differed from the current ones. And then it was supposed that two bodies, such as Jupiter and Saturn, came close together, causing severe perturbations and powerful tidal effects in the atmosphere. Being a system of binary double stars, they could interact to such an extent that they would lead to a stellar explosion. Velikovsky suggested that an event placed the planets in the place that we see today and launched a chain of events that resulted in a flood on the Earth. People that remembered early tragedies enacted in the sky by the heavenly bodies asserted that Jupiter drove Saturn away from its place in the sky before Jupiter Zeus became the chief god. Saturn, Kronos, occupied the celestial throne. In all ancient religions, the dominion passes from Saturn to Jupiter. So now you just go back, look at Genesis. Genesis, God created the earth. So who created the earth? What created the earth? God. What was it telling you? Jupiter. Just read to you. Jupiter. Because of Jupiter, the earth was created. So in the beginning, God created the earth. Jupiter. So then what happened? You had something happen on the planet and God got pissed and caused the flood. But what caused the flood? Jupiter. Now you gotta bounce back and forth between stories. In the mix of this, what's supposed to have taken place? Saturn, which is Satan, fell. There was a war in heaven. Just told you, Jupiter and Saturn. So the fall of Saturn is the fall of Satan, caused by God. God is who? Jupiter. Jupiter caused Saturn to fall as being a star. It's telling you what Saturn is Satan. And then again, Jupiter causes this flood. Who causes the flood in the Bible? God. It's Jupiter it's talking about. And it says here, in alchemy, Saturn symbolizes lead, which is the base form of gold. This is to symbolize the fall of Saturn, who was once a golden sun, but has been reduced to base materials. Understand what it's saying? Base materials. This is the tale of two suns. As Saturn's energy is siphoned away by Jupiter, it is shot out like bolts of plasmic lightning. Zeus, Jupiter, lightning bolts. Some say these hit a planet, which then becomes the sun as it explodes into life. Others that these sparks of divine essence from the new sun on their own. So now understand, Jupiter is the son of Saturn. As he said, he was taken down by his sons. Jupiter is the son of Saturn. But, you have now, this conundrum. Where does this come from? And it's basically giving you, what it's talk about in Gnosticism, where you have Jupiter being the son of Saturn and Jupiter being God, the creator of this world. Where do we see this? We see this with the Demiurge and Sophia. Sophia creates the Demiurge. You understand? So we have Saturn creating Jupiter, which created this world, son of Saturn. And then we have with Sophia creating the Demiurge, which the Demiurge and Gnosticism created this world, trapped us in flesh. What happened with Saturn? They trapped him in the cube, which is materialism. So this is all symbolism. It's going to make a lot of sense if it don't already. We have the same thing with Mary. And as you can see with this book here, that's what they're trying to allude to. But you also have with Saturn, the Satan aspect, which for, with Sophia, that would be the Demiurge. And we would look at the Demiurge as being, evil. And then we go back and look at, well, wait a minute. How do you tie this together with Jupiter? If Jupiter created the earth, which we're here because of that, then that means God is evil. So then you got to understand and look back. Well, wait a minute. So we had a golden age where everything was going great. And that was under Saturn. So how can Saturn be Satan and the evil one? So then you start to understand Satanism and why the occult is, this way, and why all of the Saturn worship, which is deeper than this. So we know the Bible is full of esoteric knowledge, as I talk about. But when you study Sumerian history, the question you ask yourself is, how is it that the Sumerians can be, so old? The history can be so old. How is it we don't find the Sumerians in the Bible? How is it the Bible is not talking about the ancient Sumerians? So I know people are going to say, isn't they talking about the Sumerians in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, when it's talking about the land of Shinar? And Shinar translates into Babel, which, Babylon. So one of the things I like to do when we get words like this is always go back to Codex Sinaiticus, because you want to try to establish if it's really talking about the Sumerians or the Babylonians. And we know, it's the Tower of Babel. So even when you go to Codex Sinaiticus, we only get, it's supposed to be like 8 different translations or 8 times that Shinar is mentioned in the Bible. We only really see it once in Codex Sinaiticus, and it's not saying the same thing as it says in Isaiah 11:11. You go to Isaiah 11:11 in the Codex Sinaiticus, and we do find it there, and we find the word that you can see here, which supposedly translates into Babel, meaning Babylon, which we know Babel means, it means speech. So when you go into the other verses, which, Genesis is supposed to be mentioned. Also in the book of Daniel, which is not in Codex Sinaiticus, by the way. Zechariah, we go there and we can see here where it's supposed to be. You don't see that same word in Zechariah, so it's not there where it's supposed to be. Also supposed to be mentioned in the book of Joshua, and it's not there when you look in Codex Sinaiticus. So we got to understand, as I always say, Sinaiticus, which is the oldest complete biblical manuscript written in Greek, it's not the same as the King James Version. This stuff was changed for a reason. Now, this is important because we have to establish, one, they're telling us that this book, the Bible, is old. It's giving us the recorded history from start to finish. How is it not mentioning the Sumerians? And we understand why it's not mentioning the Sumerians, because the Sumerian civilization wasn't discovered until the mid-19th century. We're talking about the 1850s. After 1850 is when they first discovered the Sumerian civilization, which we know, of course, the powers that be already knew. Now it says here, the ancient Sumerians, the black-headed ones, lived in the southern part of what is now Iraq. The heartland of Sumer lay between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers and what the Greeks later called Mesopotamia. This territory, once skillfully irrigated, proved very fertile, and major cities had long been in existence before the period when archaeologists can identify the Sumerian people themselves. The Sumerians were characteristically inventive and are likely to have been responsible for the development of the first writing well before 3000 BCE. Sumerians were recording their language using simple pictures. They wrote on tablets of clay, later evolving the script that to us is known as cuneiform or wedge-shaped. Now, real quick, one of the things I get into, I always talk about Ethiopians, just talk about, the whole out of Africa thing. You got to remember, like I said, when these people basically came from out of hiding, it's something had happened. And we have this whole migration that's supposed to have taken place. Whatever that was, as I said, the civilization that followed the Nile up to Egypt, when they got there, those pyramids was there. Just that simple. Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure was there. Great Pyramids was already there. They are already been dated. Great Pyramid is said to be over 100,000 years old. That's well older than the Sumerian civilization. So the Sumerians, whatever happened towards the end of the, that period with these ancient Egyptians happened with them, or they was the last remnants of the civilization that, was either, last to go underground or last to do whatever, but they're not older than the ancient Egyptians, or let's just say who built those pyramids. So we can't go and say that civilization is older for sure, or that they invented writing, even though we don't find writings in the Great Pyramid. But we know that knowledge, the group that came up the Nile, they had it. Because when they got there, they tried to recreate it. So we're not going to say, it's debatable, but I still got to give it to the ancient Egyptians. But you had a time frame where people was doing expeditions to the Middle East to try to validate the Bible. And for a long time they was going there. We know these expeditions was taking years. And they find stuff and they got to excavate that take even more years, especially so long ago. But a lot of people don't understand it was a whole time where they were going out to try to validate the Bible. People was, obsessed with it, to go out in history and find these places to try to validate the book. And they went out and they, this is when we start uncovering everything. This is where you have Champollion and all these French archaeologists and researchers or what have you going out trying to validate religion. Now you've seen in the video, it's talking about Jupiter, talking about what happened in this whole collision and everything like that. So this is important to understand, maintain that information. So biggest part, we got to understand, where did this stuff come from? Because a lot of people have this idea that what we've been told about the Sumerians and the whole story about Enki and Enlil, everything about the Sumerian tablets and all this information about the Anunnaki is just this really ancient information that's been around for a long time. And it's because the Sumerian, civilization is so old, people just automatically couple the two, not realizing what they're saying and what's going on and what's been put out about this information. Now you have to understand, it's one man, Zachariah Stitchin.